Hi, everybody. A little bit of skullduggery going on here. Um, we have a number of questions. We won't be able to get through them, and I'm very grateful. So send in as many as you want, and as we go on, I'll answer as many as I can. Want and can are two different types of things. Remember, when I'm answering questions, you have to really be like, cognizant of the fact that these are answers that I currently believe may be closer to a truth that is relative. Every answer you have in your whole spiritual quest is subject to change. You are subject to change. This is really important. Your experience that lies within will be the thing that makes adjustments in how you see things and how you value things. Um, I recommend that anyone and everyone, from time to time, close their eyes to everything they hear. Did you hear that one? Close their eyes to everything they hear and try and understand something the best you can from inside. That will give you a chance to understand that you're really not open to anything other than what you currently believe. And that would be called current or relative truths. Don't negate relative truths. They're very important for you because, in fact, you'll do nothing other than what you want to do. And that's the nature of that big, really strong survival system that we all have inside of us. There's other systems in there. One is curiosity that is really profoundly helpful in us so that we can go beyond what we believe we have to do. It's not a big secret, I'm sorry to say out loud, it's not a big secret that no one really allows another idea to enter into them and stay there unless they slowly get to the point where they can value the idea from their perspective. It's called a bias. It happens everywhere, in everything, even in science. I'm sorry to say that nothing is pure logic, meaning nothing gives the purity of a truth unless you begin to experience it yourself. And that, even the purest truth that you can experience, is subject to change. If it changes you, then you are changed. The next step will mean you will begin to relate to an additional change. Be okay with that. These are cycles of intense internalizations. We fight not to have this happen. And that's legitimate. Did you hear that part? It is legitimate not to let you be swayed by yourself. Oh, let's take a look at it from another perspective. It would be really helpful if you could understand beyond what you believe has to be true. That doesn't make you right or wrong. It just makes you willing to go into a state that relates to something beyond where you are. That's all it does. And there's a continuance after that with your relationship of how to understand. The vulnerability in this is really strong. You are vulnerable in that you have a number of ways of seeing things. Oh my God, I've thought this for 100 years, 10 years, 2 years, whatever it is. And oh my goodness, look at me now. I've wasted all that time. Absolutely not. There's no time waste in this. Spiritual growth relates to energy. Our understanding is always behind. It's the nature of how we tend to look at things. behind in that, if we engage directly with what we believe has to be true, then we automatically reach internally to hold ourselves in that position. Very hard to let ourselves release a little bit. And if you did release a little bit, don't throw away the old idea. See how it kind of fits. If it doesn't fit, move forward. See how it could fit. If you do that, you'll be using a kind of sense within yourself that relates to allowing mind to open into the intellect. The brain is a cavity in which you watch things occur. The you that is watching is not understood by you or me or anybody else. The you that is watching is a you that is moving towards a refinement of an understanding, until that understanding is almost refined to not as necessary as it used to be. And then a new understanding presents itself because you're actually perceiving a new understanding as opposed to coming up with one. Big difference. Coming up with one is not negative, but it's an interesting thing when you look and see that there must be more than what you currently believe. And then you have to test it within yourself. In other words, you test it with respect to what you can allow yourself to believe. Once again, not right, not wrong, just operating through you, trying to develop through you, trying to understand. Checking and noticing and being okay with not being able to do so as well. That allows you to open more. In other words, automatically you don't defend what you already think is right, or others think is right. It's hard for us as human beings to gain access to something called the ability to observe, to watch, because with it comes an automatic understanding that is much beyond the relationship that we have with what we think we know. This big difference. The concept of truth lies within that. It's like a big line. And our relative truths are huge. We believe we know and understand because we read something that makes some sense to us. We hardly understand what it is that is involved with the sense-making. Slowly we begin to relate to an understanding that is a movement beyond sense-making. It's almost like recognition. Oh my gosh, this may be more true than anything I've ever thought before. The next statement is, oh my goodness, I've got to remember that this may only be another step towards something that I couldn't really understand unless this particular experience has actually happened to me. That movement beyond what you thought had to be true. Don't throw old truths out, please. Keep them. Did I say that as weird as I could? Why? Because then you know the nature of how you function. And you're beginning to understand the circumstances that underlie your relationship, with the depth that you can go to allow yourself to open beyond what you currently believe and will allow yourself to understand. I hope that helps some of the unasked questions. It is very difficult in this particular department, the Department of So-Called Spiritual Growth. My goodness, There's so many answers to so many of the same questions. Be with them. Just don't pick one. Take a look at them. Understand. Understand that there are many answers as well. But the experience that you may have may change those answers. Be okay with the experience. Subjectivity is a very important part of a relationship that you have with something beyond objectivity. Let me try. Objectivity can only be there relative to how much you can perceive and allow and make sense of in a kind of a logical way. This must equal that, must equal this. No. Yes, it's important to do things like that. Almost vital. But also important to allow yourself to wonder about an idea that comes into your mind, your brain cavity. Sorry about that. Have to be consistent. If you can watch it and perceive it, you're not making necessarily or need to make necessarily any sense of it. The kind of perceiving I'm talking about is the ability to notice something's refinement relative to the coarseness of a need to protect what you believe. If you're learning something, try to give an example. If you are learning something and you can't quite understand it, suddenly there is a moment that some people call it eureka moment, all the rest of those, all kinds of stuff that they call it. But there is a moment when you know you've caught on through you to something that another is trying to help you make sense of, whether it be book, person, I don't care, doesn't matter. Until that particular moment, it is not yours. You can memorize it, you can engage with it, you can do whatever you want, you can even repeat it as if it is yours, but it isn't yours. That flow within you will help you to know that it's not yours, because you'll start projecting as if it's a show. You're on stage, blah, 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 blah. It's scary. But if it is yours, you look at it and my gosh, you will have an understanding that is kind of a platelet for another understanding. Something will occur in you that allows you to open your relationship with understanding that doesn't fit the mold that you currently carry as an individual related to spirituality or whatever else it is. If it happens to be in the sciences, you'll seek out, you'll search, you'll try to figure out, find somebody else that's thinking as if this one idea doesn't fit. And you'll do that, not necessarily to grab onto that person or whatever they think, but you're looking for reassurance that what you are perceiving, not seeing, not considering, perceiving, is a notation of something that has not been sanctified, so to speak, by the structure that you call you, your name, your image, your personality's version of what must be. But the curiosity that you have about movement will open a kind of sense. You will hear a word or two spoken, even externally I'm talking about. Could be internal, but externally, in your own mind. The unconscious can be able to throw something at you. Collective, if you look at young stuff, will throw something at you. Your dream life, unconscious deeply, will throw something at you, metaphorically usually, hard to discern. But in that moment of perception, that is not a moment of you figuring it out. It's a moment of you understanding that this second is pivotal. And you're making sense of something just beyond what you can. And that will reoccur and reoccur and reoccur. Many people have talked about this in relationship to meditation, for example. I've heard so many people, and many people have heard this, not a big deal about me, saying, I meditate every day for 20 years and I have not moved at all. Well, you can't see what you've moved. You can't see it because you don't perceive it. You don't understand it. You don't care to. You just want to finish doing what you did for 20 years. That's legitimate. That's a protection of you and how you are. 1 second past that reflex to help that form to survive the way it is, and you might perceive something within the structure of you that allows you to shift something that is extremely valuable in the movement that you're involved with as an individual, internally, towards what you might call a real perception, beyond what you've read, beyond what you've currently perceived, or fulfilling what you currently have perceived, not understanding fully, but entrenched in a groove that is shifting you out of a place that you are protecting. That is a wondrous thing to have happen, and very hard to be okay with seeing it. It makes us feel or be involved with a sense of vulnerability that is profoundly strong. That vulnerability, if it could be recognized by you as something other than something to be afraid of or causing you discomfort, may be something that enables you to pull back from what you believe has to be true in your personality or in whatever you think already, so that you can understand that you are in a movement towards something beyond what you hold to be of value. And that holding is powerful. Needs to be that way in our world. It's like maintaining. You're kind of a maintenance person. You maintain what you have that makes you feel comforted for the purpose of being comforted. How could you possibly say that's wrong or bad? How could you say it's the only way to do things either? Through these cycles of growth, our relationship with understanding undergoes tremendous change. It's a change that we have a lot of difficulty with. It's not a negative change. It's a progressive change. Process is the most important thing. I know it makes no sense to, if you're exceedingly logical and you follow the logic and it's the only way it can be. Logic is in the process of process as well. Sounds weird, but nonetheless, it's true. Tell me, please, that you don't think the same way you did when you were a teenager. No, I'm talking about progressively thinking things through, not the jumble of trying to make sense of things as we all have gone through in our lives. It's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the willingness to go beyond and to maintain the understanding of what and how you are made up in relationship to how you think about spirituality, whatever it may be. And then begin to understand that it's okay to have gone the route that you go towards spiritual growth. When you listen to people grumbling about other people's versions of spiritual growth, please don't get involved with it. It's just a method. Everyone moves through methods. And it supports whatever personality type might be there, or frequency type might be there, one could say. Very difficult for us. Once we get a set of rules, it's very hard for us to let the rules soften so we can actually grow. However, some of the information that's out there may be tremendously helpful for a time. Helps you to understand, gives meaning to an experience. It helps you to think, oh, you're okay. But also some of the rules stop you from being okay. They might help you to comfort yourself, but they may not help you to move beyond all understanding related to spiritual growth. Valerie writes a very interesting question. Hope you don't mind me talking about this, Valerie. Could you give us your views on this? It's really, this guy says at brain death, the soul is still connected to the body and can attach itself to the new body. We have all heard the stories. What are the implications to our soul?
Is that with transplants?
Is that with transplants? Transplants is another word. Just so you, if you haven't heard, there are some Indian yogis who have engaged their soul with some of their students so that they can continue their relationship with helping others in a higher state, as long as a student can handle the intense increase of energy that will occur. Because remember, the soul's relationship, if you talk about it, if it relates to the chakras being open, because that's the mechanism of the soul from some people's point of view, then if the student has the capacity of handling energy on a relative basis, fairly high energy, then sometimes they make a deal. They talk to each other about this. They don't do it without each other's, their agreement. In this particular case, it makes a big difference. What happens is that the individual connects with the student, and actually through an act of will that doesn't have anything to do with the personality will. It's a will related to the soul. Links up with the student's system and operates in the student to take him or her past where they could have gone. But the student has to be able to deal with the physical body, the emotions, and the mind, has to be able to deal with the energies that would increase because his or her soul structure will be increased tremendously. This is often done in a cave, where you have to. The student will have to stay there for years to try and handle the juice that has come into them. Well, some yogis talk about this. But they also know that if they move into a student and the student can't handle it, the student will have real problems. And they don't want to do that to a student. They actually have the capacity to recognize and understand that particular level because they are living in that level. They are alive in that level. And the student may not be able to handle it, so that they do not do this. Why anyone would want to do that is really based on rules and regulations and theories about soul interaction and what that is and why it is. And I'm so sorry, but we can talk a lot about it, but there's not much there that we know for sure. Yeah, there's a question coming from Marlene.
I'm just wondering how that relates or doesn't relate to, or the differences with transmission of energy.
Well, if you heard this question, it relates to transmission of energy and how it would relate. It would be very dependent on the frequencies that the teacher was using in these chakras. They could use within himself or herself, and how that would occur in the individual student. This is a very complex situation. This is not just, oh, let's just manifest in this student. It's way beyond that. As some might understand, sometimes different frequencies are in different chakras, operating through different chakras. Ultimately, some people believe that an individual at another state can handle different frequencies coming through them. For example, if he or she was a yogi, from, for example, in a heart center or a brow center, they can handle various frequencies coming through that. They call that mastership or some odd thing like that, where the individual may be able to handle different colors instead of getting into rays and stuff. Could handle an indigo ray or second ray or whatever, first ray red and gold, a mixture of green and yellow, or in a heart center, and that's 4, and therefore can operate through that center for the purpose of helping another in their center with a particular frequency that one can relate to. For example, with that gold, greenish gold, they may have a greenish hue to a blue that relates in their heart centers. These rays are much more complicated than what you read. And because of that, that energy can come in and help that person broaden out in that center and help the physical and emotional system and mental systems in the personality to handle those frequencies. Even though it may be uncomfortable for a period of time, they get to be able to handle it because those major frequencies are being of great help in another's soul. Okay. So frequencies can be really important. It's not an overshadowing the way we understand overshadowing, but it can be similar. If you call things like overshadowing, that's different. A being on an astral plane who is no longer here may be able to, or a higher state being, an angelic form of some kind that hits many people's belief system, may be able to overshadow a being who is teaching. I've seen this happen with some teachers. It's kind of very interesting, where another being is in them and the individual is speaking the words that the other being is expressing, comes out of their particular mouth, for the purpose of helping the people that she is or he is talking to. This is a complicated system. This is not after death. This is during life. After death, there are some who believe I did talk about the Indian focal point. Traditional mystic rule is that the soul sticks around, and you can see this basically in the New Testament, for about 3 days, looking to get back into the body, but realizing the body is no longer functional. This is according to the biblical background, as in Lazarus, for example, in the Christian New Testament. And therefore, Jesus waits till after the 3 days to show that his capacity is related to something beyond the soul, but he controls the soul. So he's linked up with a higher state, God state. Theosophy might call it the monadic state. But related to a higher state. Okay, that's still about death. A spiritualist, for example, some of the real ones who have clairvoyance, at the after-death level, have seen people stay around to help their children or their relatives after they died, basically engaging with an astral form that looks very physical and interact with that physical astral system that relates also to a mental structure. They can see what's happening and try to help them. Others have reported seeing friends and relatives die and being helped to continue on their way after physical death. Like, in other words, they die, they're still there, a person sees that and notes it, and then others come and try to help that person to go on into another state. As you know, personal experience is sometimes influenced by what people believe or need to believe for their own comfort and belief. It is true that various kinds of clairvoyance can occur, and these are just a couple of areas of clairvoyance. But there are many other stages of clairvoyance as well. It's really important to know that, because seeing colors around your body doesn't necessarily mean very much unless you've set up a rule where you say, oh, that, for example, might be of a will frequency, or they're very willful, blah, 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 blah. But no entertainment is given to the idea that there is a coarseness of that same frequency and a softness of that frequency up to the highest of all states of every frequency. It's an idea nobody wants to entertain, simply because it's easier to make the simplest statement as if you know something. And it's difficult not to do that. But it's important to allow yourself to be okay with thinking it through in a different way than what you actually believe. That's allowed. Cultivates a kind of wisdom, and also helps you to understand that you're not extra special, better than other people is what I mean by that. It's just a piece, just a cycle, just a movement, process. Other states can be, I wrote some of this stuff down, I apologize for that, but other states can be as real as anyone's belief. It is thought by some, as on earth here, that what one believes is played out and is a helper towards the adjustment of what an individual might think might be true. You have all kinds of experiences. You make sense of them in the way that you do. Nothing is really negative about that. Once again, process. You figure stuff out, and if you're the figure outer, you believe that must be consequential. You must be consequential. That's normal. It may not be as consequential as what you believe, important is what you believe, but in a moment or two, you may change your mind, or you may see it in a broader context. And that is important. So read broadly, learn broadly, and be okay with making mistakes. Mistakes don't mean very much if it's part of a process, because you move from them, you learn from them. It's fine. Okay, looking at that particular one, Valerie, I would then say that whatever experience anyone has about this kind of thing, fine, fair ball, but there isn't one answer to these things. An individual in growth, for example, as one fellow that I saw, he was ready to go on to the next state and not necessarily would be coming back, wouldn't be really coming back here. And as he left, he was guided by others who would be very helpful to him in his movement forward into other states, because life is not only at these levels. From my perspective, you can think about that in whatever which way you wish and make some sense and enjoy your comments. Marie-José Perrier said, if we are spiritual in our essence, why do we have to work at being or becoming spiritual? You don't. It's a bit like this, Marie. You go to a playground where there are children, preschool or kindergarten kids, and they're having a lot of fun playing in a sandbox. And somebody brings a small little toy shovel over, made of plastic. And quite naturally, in the playground, there's a wee little competition going on for territory. We would never do that as adults, but nonetheless, it's a territorial thing with almost everything. But these little kids, of course, all of a sudden, they realize that there's 5 or 6 people in the sandbox. And there's almost not enough room for making little sandcastles. So one person takes it into their mind that this sandbox is theirs. Once again, we'd never do that, but nonetheless, here we are in the sandbox. And they start moving other kids around. You can do it by pushing. You can do it by instigation. You can do it by knowing that you're the right one to be in the sandbox. You can do anything you wish. At this point, you're not going to figure it out, because there's nothing there to figure anything out with. What you're doing is you're really reserving territory in the sandbox. Or you can push somebody and they push you back and you fall, and then you complain to the person in charge. Instigation is fantastic. It really works, apparently. These things are what we all do in relationship to what we believe has to be, but we need someone to do it with. You can't do it inside yourself. Oh, I don't think that's true. Have you ever said, well, I'm not going to be involved with that just because I have to do stuff. For years I've tried to teach people this small little thing that was given to me that makes perfect sense to me. It doesn't have to make any sense to anybody. And I made a DVD of some of these things by a simple thing of opening your hands. You can associate that with opening any chakra. But if you open your hands, that higher state will come into your hands and move your hands in a direction that would be helpful to open another center or any other centers to broaden your capacity to handle energy. This is very difficult for people to make sense of, because from our point of view, there's nothing there that makes some sense. Well, it is a Christian modality. healing was the principal way of engaging with spirituality. Solar plexus for the Hebrews was really an important center, still is. It stimulates all other centers and entices an individual to go beyond what they are so-called destined to be based on their particular place in life. Stimulates the brain. Very profound interaction. The Hindus, the Buddhists, the Taoists, the Islamic groups all use their hands to stimulate energies in the main structure, so that the main structure, which is literally involved with the development of a personality's form all around us, we utilize, use, instigate the use of intensity for a purpose related to what we believe needs to be real for us, then more energy can be stimulated. If more energy can come through this personal system, personalized system, and you can then begin to watch you in action relative to perceiving you. Remember, I talked about this just a few minutes ago. You see something, you perceive something you never saw before. A little light is shed because more light is coming into you. That's another metaphorical way of expressing it. The hands help you to increase the amount of light you can handle in you. You just then need to become more comfortable in having more light operating through you as a human being. Meaning, you don't put on airs of being able or not. You just are, just have more energy pouring through you. It affects you. It affects your whole system. In other words, your sensory system is affected. All of them. Then they're affected again on another level as time goes on. Old ways of seeing things are not considered as important as they used to be. Not by anybody else, by you. Because by that time you are now perceiving within as opposed to leaning on what needs to be. So the journey is from you inside, deeply involved with process. Speeding up that process speeds up your relationship with understanding you better and others, because others are doing the same as you are. No matter what you think of them, they are doing exactly what you are. They are trying to survive. That's why compassion becomes, and love, it becomes really important. Kindness, vital. And respect for yourself, but for others as well. Even if you don't agree with them. Doesn't mean they're right versus wrong. It just means this is the method that they're choosing to do things with, for reasons that may be known to them or not known to them. Because we don't know for sure. We're used to objectifying relative to rules. This is right because. That's right because. That's normal for us. So it's not negative. It's normal. So we're doing these kinds of things, and what we're doing is becoming more conscious of consciousness. That's a hard one to think about. And we call an increase in consciousness spiritual. It's a new definition that has been cultivated over the last while. It used to be that if you believed in God, then you were more spiritual. Now, belief in God was not acting in a godlike way. It was having respect for others, if you go to the New Testament at least. And also, many other belief systems are constantly related to compassion, kindness, respect, love. Worth thinking about. Anyway, that's the one I've focused on. Have we got enough? I think we have time for this one. This is from Mary Lou Mangion. Do all knee-jerk reactions relate to defending and protecting the image that we have of ourselves? This is an interesting question. The tricky part of that is all knee-jerk reactions. No, I don't think so. Not all, but many. I tried to write something out here, and I just didn't want to miss anything. I said survival is a profound need. Also, there is, however, subtle, a need to know, understand that which is just ahead of what we believe. I think I talked a little bit about this, Mary Lou. And these beliefs are biased beliefs, and for good reason. They buffer and protect for a time what we call valuable. This is really important to know that being valuable is flexible. It isn't a target focal point. It's very interesting. If you see value in something that you're doing, notice that it's not valuable in some other things. If you start seeing the subtleties of what you believe has to be tight as valuable, then what you're doing is understanding you, because you will look at yourself and say, under these conditions, I want it to be valuable. I want this to be the only way I should engage. And you're subtly disengaging with the images that you have to allow in you so that you feel comfortable with you, and you're entering into a kind of honest relationship, others call it true relationship, truthful relationship with you. No matter what the subtlety is, you will begin to be okay with changing the whatever it equals to, whatever your speaking equals to. You will allow yourself not to be as right in 1 second as you thought you were a second ago. And that for you means that you will be more open to perceiving. Because once again, here's the point. If you perceive, you gain access to the perception of you being an energy being. You start to notice frequency or energy in you. You're set up to do that. But you're not trained to do that. You don't want to allow that to be a truth, because then the images that you've already constructed matter less. And what I'm proposing is, don't let them matter less in a negative way. Allow them to be there, and note that you use them for your own purposes. And when you do use them, see what those purposes are. When you do that, you're not cramping and tightening up to see those things. You're letting go and noticing. This is part of our world right here on this planet. And this has been like this because we are learning how to function in the physical aspects of things, the emotional aspects of things, a very much broader base, and the so-called mental aspects of things, so that we can soften down the intensity that we use here in the personality form, which is energy, so that we can perceive beyond that which is inside of us, energy as well, at a different level. We can see beyond the personalized version of the intensity needed to do what you think you have to do in that moment, any moment, whether it be reflexive or whether it's something that you're constructing inside yourself for reasons that you may not want to express because they don't look that good to you. Nobody's perfect. I hope that helps a bit. The most interesting things is that we all have a need to know, but also to perfect what we currently know as true. Now, that means perfect and protect, part of the same orientation. Wonderful thing about that is once we get to a point where we can actually see ahead of time that that's not going to be helpful or may not be something that you want to continue with, bingo, you may notice something else along the line, maybe a purpose of why you did this. Also, our self-esteem needs support until it doesn't. Little pieces of new knowledge at a time helps us to reach from the inside out, reconsidering beyond how right we need to be okay, within and in the sight of others. None of this needs to be considered negative, but it needs to be considered by us, again, process through which we live and others live. Acknowledging that helps us a little bit to understand that each and every person grows through them, and they can be helped by others who have been there and are willing to be helpful, not necessarily noticed, just helpful. Meaning, more energy can be expressed through those centers or chakras or zephyrat, whatever you would call them. More energy comes in, just a little bit, so that it gives you more perception of what is going on with the previous amount of energy that came in to help you be the you that you've been. I wish everybody a tremendous little boost of growth. May it happen to all of us. Take care. Good night.